The Behemoth Brewing Company presents the Department of Conversation with Pat Brittenden. Behemoth, give me something hoppy.
Well, I tell you what, it is lovely when old friends come back. Old in the form of people we've known for a while, not old in the form of aged. Want to welcome back to the show, Department of Conversation with Behemoth Brewery, Katy Thomas. Katy, good morning to you.
Good morning, Pat. Thank you so much for having me.
Dude, it is more than a pleasure. And let me just say, let's do this and have a look at something for people to know why I say old friend. I think we're up to about episode 180, something like that, 179. And here's episode 11. Here's episode 11 right here.
That was just not part
You
of
coming down to Dunedin,
dynamic,
having a chat with us about your family, your son, and your medicinal cannabis advocacy. Would that be a fair way to say it?
Yeah, it's really disconcerting actually to see that the needle hasn't moved since then. Like I can't believe we're back here talking about the same thing again, or we're going to be talking about the same thing again. What year was that shot? What year?
20. Well, we're coming up 3 years. So we're coming up 3 years since we started. So what are we now? 20. So it's end of 2018, second half of 2018.
Yeah. That's abominable. Sorry, not that it's never a pleasure to be here and talking to you, Pat. It's just
smooth. That was a good save in the end. Smooth.
No, it's just an absolute crying shame that we're still.
Look, what I want to do is I want to start, because something's happened significant within, I guess, your advocacy and the work you're doing, but specifically around Eddy, your son, and his access to CBD at the moment. I want to play, if you're okay with it. You put out a video, gosh, how long ago? May the 5th, so not that long ago, and it's had nearly 230,000 views about something that's specifically happening now. And I think one of the reason, and you've got trigger warnings on your Instagram post here, because in the video you show the effects of Eddy's condition, and I guess I'm going to paraphrase by saying when he doesn't have his CBD, when he has a seizure. Obviously this is what's been picked up on. I mean, you've been all over the press in the last, kind of 4 weeks. I want to show this, and again, I guess I've put out there warning for people. This next 60 seconds may be, I can't think of the right word. Let's just say it may be horrific for you to watch, but it's important for us to understand what we're talking about. Because the last time you and I talked, and you told the story of being in hospital and Eddy having seizures all the time, and you giving him cannabis. I mean, you told the story, but seeing the story is very different. So if you're cool. Yeah. Let's just play this now for people to see, and I'll just turn my mic off so we'll hear the audio for this as well.
This is Eddy. He's 6 years old. He loves trampolines and going to the park with his brother. He has an infectious giggle, and he loves reading books in bed. He also has nocturnal epilepsy, and right now we can't access the life-saving CBD that stops his seizures from happening. So night after night, he cries himself to sleep. Night after night, he has seizures. He can't breathe. And we as parents have to stand by helplessly and watch our baby boy fight for his life. It's not right. Our medicinal cannabis bill is broken, and the Minister of Health doesn't seem to care. If you do one thing today, let it be that you share this story. Let it be that you add your name to ours on the form I created at wellfitmum.com. It takes 2 seconds to fill out. Please help us help our boy. This is Eddy. He's 6 years old.
Yeah. Obviously, you being respectful of you and you guys, horrific to watch. Hard to watch as well. Yeah. So can you explain what is happening right now? There's some specific issues going on right now with Eddy's access, and then let's talk about the general conversation around medicinal cannabis.
Yeah. So as that video explains, Eddy has a rare form of epilepsy. it's incredibly hard to treat. Just as a general rule of thumb, his type of seizure disorder is just, it tends to be refractory or intractable. They're drug resistant types of seizures. They're particularly dangerous because they're nocturnal. There are more incidences of SUDEP, which is sudden unexpected death from epilepticus status, which is when you basically go into a seizure that doesn't stop until you die. Partly because of the severity of the seizures, and also partly because they happen at night. They're less likely to be as closely supervised as they would be during the day, and they can be silent, so the seizure can start without warning, and we've never known. And that is our biggest fear. It's why we sleep with him every night. Even though we have a pretty elaborate safety system with like barriers and motion sensor video cameras and night lights and all sorts of things. But yeah. And with regard to his access to CBD, we've been using the same stuff for more than 3 years since I first discovered that CBD worked for his seizures. And then suddenly at the end of March, we had our first interruption. And because I order his medicine every month, because it's quite expensive, it's upwards of $1,500. So we're just not in a position where we can go, hey, we'll just buy a year's worth of medicine and just have it sit there on the shelf. So we just fill his scripts monthly like we do with all the rest of his meds. And they didn't come through because I'm always tracking it from the UK. And I saw they were stopped, and they were just sitting there at customs and nothing was really moving. Normally they'd only spend a day and then get released to us and be out for delivery. And we just don't have that kind of time window. We don't have weeks where we can kind of be without, because it only takes a day for him to not have his medicine, and he would have seizures that night. And so I contacted the courier service, and they said, you need to get in touch with MedSafe, but we've only got the Wellington number. So I rang Wellington, nobody picked up. I left an answer phone message, and then I got the number for the Auckland branch, and then I got the email as well, and I sent them an email, and I was pretty clear in the email. I said, I can see that his medicines have been stopped. We're running out of CBD. He's having an increasing number of seizures as his dose is diminishing, so we were trying to eke it out.
Sure.
What can I do to get it released? And they said, we sent you a letter in the mail. Nearly a month later, I still hadn't received that letter. In 2021, we're sending snail mail. Just beyond me. And they said, so the first problem was that for the first time, the manufacturer forgot to include Eddy's prescription. The first time in 3 years. It was so unfortunate that we'd had a prescription inside his deliveries every year for 3.5 years. And this one time it gets stopped. It wasn't there. So lovely. Shit happens. So I said, okay, all right. I've got an appointment with his doctor this week. I'll get you a new prescription and get it over to you. And they were like, oh no, well, actually, that's not good enough. We can't do that. We have to either return it to the manufacturer or destroy it, because you can't bring it in without a prescription. I'm like, but he does have a prescription. It's just not in the box. He has prescribed that medicine. The prescription for that exists. Allow me to provide that to you and you can have it released. And they're like, no, it doesn't work like that. It came in without that prescription, so it has to be destroyed. So immediately the manufacturer just dispatched another lot of medicine to us, with the prescription included. The second lot that came in, so he has two medicines, one which is very fast acting. It's a water-soluble CBD, and we use that to kind of carry him through the first part of the night. And then he also has like what you would normally expect, an oil, a typical, just standard CBD oil, and that is longer lasting. The bioavailability is completely different. So it does go through the first pass metabolism, but it also means it stays in the system longer. And this one that came through was controlled, the red oil, which is actually the stronger one. It's the more important, it has a higher dose. And it also, the problem that they had with it was the percentage of CBN. So it didn't have any THC at all, ND, non-detectable levels, but the CBN was 0.2% over the allowed amount of specified substances. So we have this mental 2% threshold that
just explain what CBM is so people understand.
CBN is a molecule. It's a really important cannabinoid for us because it has sedative and anticonvulsant properties. It is also a degraded form of THC. So it's not THC, it's what happens when THC breaks down. And why it's really important is because it doesn't have all of those, the same level of psychoactive properties that THC does, but it still has those sedative and anticonvulsant properties. THC actually has anticonvulsant properties as well, but that psychoactive element is problematic, for a child. It's not really what we want him to be experiencing, even though he would be asleep. It's just, as a parent, we're just not super comfortable with that. So CBN is, it's a really exciting cannabinoid. The scientist Raphael Mechoulam, who originally discovered THC and CBD. He's kind of known as like the grandfather of medicinal cannabis. He pioneered the first trials with epileptic children and, discovered that CBD was really incredible for seizure control. He's actually said since that he wished he had dedicated his life to CBN instead of CBD because he thinks it just has so many more beneficial properties for analgesia, for chronic pain, for just, it's really crucial. And for Edward, it's incredibly crucial. It's not that there was a very high amount of CBN. There was actually only 0.136% of CBN, so not even a full percent. But what matters is the proportion of CBN to CBD. So you are not allowed to have more than 2% of any other cannabinoids in a CBD product. So it has to be pretty much completely CBD for it to be considered a CBD product under our laws.
Right.
Problem with that is it doesn't allow for a plethora of full spectrum products. And what a full spectrum product is a whole plant extract. It's a CO2 subcritical extraction. And what it does is it doesn't just harvest the CBD, it harvests the CBD in proportion to all of the other cannabinoids that are present in the cannabis plant. So there's actually hundreds of cannabinoids. There are also terpenes and flavonoids. People might know what flavonoids are because they're present in other nutraceuticals and therapeutic substances. And they work synergistically together. Just like we have an endocannabinoid system that regulates our sleep and our appetite and our ability to remember and forget, we can actually supplement any deficiencies that we have in our endocannabinoid system with exogenous phytocannabinoids from the cannabis plant, because it also has a cannabinoid system that mimics our own. What we have found works best for Edward is not just CBD by itself, but CBD when it's extracted in the same way that it lives within the plant and the same way it exists in our body, which is not in isolation. It's in a direct proportion to all the other cannabinoids in our body, the same way that it exists in the plant. So this 2% threshold is really problematic because it's driving us down to a model that only leaves room for isolate or synthetics. which is not actually what we need. And it's not actually particularly beneficial. There was actually just a court case in Germany, a really crucial court case that overturned its position that was very similar. It was only looking at isolate or CBD enriched plants, and they've now reversed that decision because they realize that actually the benefit is in the whole plant extraction. You can't treat it like just another molecule or just another pharmaceutical, because it's very, very, very unique, and the powerful properties exist in its natural state. And it's not like hemp grows out of the ground as a controlled substance. It's just a plant.
Yeah, and look, I'm
product. It's considered food in the UK. It's not even treated as a medicine.
Gotcha. I'm aware we don't have a huge amount of time today as well. So let's jump into also the conversation around specifically what's happening at the border, because I'm writing down a series of questions that I want to chuck at you as well, and I want to make sure we give enough time for the story and also enough time to get the ideas out there. So it sounds like what you're basically saying is that we're stopped at the border for bureaucratic reasons and for a scientific condition or a condition they've put on it, which it sounds like you're saying is a bit silly, but that's the reasons at the moment. It was stopped at the border. It didn't have the prescription. They wouldn't accept the prescription if it wasn't already with the order, and that there was a condition based on the percentage of CBM to CBD, that a threshold that it crossed, which it seems like you're saying is a silly threshold, but in that person's mind's eye, these are the rules, so they wouldn't let it through. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And then it happened again. Then we found another product that was off the shelf compliant. It was twice the price.
Wow.
But at that point, Eddy was having seizures every hour. He had been off school for a month. It was getting very, very, very dicey. It was pretty touch and go. And so we got that batch through, and then we did a reorder of that same product, thinking that it would be compliant. The next batch was not compliant. It was also out by 2%.
So this is crossing those thresholds again.
Crossing those thresholds
Gotcha.
again. And it's always like the most minuscule amount, like just so trivial. So that's being controlled again. And we're now in a situation where we've got 10 days to go left in my cupboard right now.
Right, so you've still got stuff there. With these thresholds, it sounds like it's like getting a speeding ticket for doing 53. Technically, there's a threshold there that says 50, but we all know that 53 makes no difference whatever to the safety of driving. But that's all of what you're saying. It's a threshold that's been put in place, and the amount that you've gone over it makes no difference practically to what you're trying to do.
It's that. It's also that threshold shouldn't be there in the first place.
Sure.
There's actually no scientific basis for it to be there. It's a straight copy and paste from another government to make a provision for a specific product, Epidiolex, that we don't even have here in New Zealand. So it has literally no local application, none whatsoever. And the ministry isn't aware of why that threshold is in there. They don't have a good reason, because I've OIA'd it. It's the only reason that it is in there is to narrow the scope of products that are available here in New Zealand to patients. It's just a restriction. It is just a way to stop it from being treated like medicine and keep it being treated as a controlled drug. But the rest of the world, every developed country in the world, knows there's no scope of abuse for CBD and has descheduled it. You can buy it over the counter. You can buy it in drink, buy it at health food stores or, your local dairy. The Australian TGA has just facilitated a pretty landmark agreement with Cannatrek and Discount Chemist Warehouse, where you'll be able to buy, I think it's up to 200, possibly 300, but I think it's 200 mgs over the counter without a prescription. Low cost, affordable, accessible. And that's what our government hasn't done. And that was the whole purpose of the medicinal cannabis bill, was to improve the accessibility, improve the affordability, and it's done the exact opposite. Because when I spoke to you here 3 years ago, I actually had medicine for Eddy at that point. And since March, I've continually been given less and less and less, and he's been given shorter and shorter timeframes to live within. And I know that our situation is literally just a metaphor for the success or failure of the medicinal cannabis scheme as it sits, because Eddy's health is dependent on it. And if it was accessible, if I had other options available here in New Zealand, obviously I would be using that. Nobody chooses to import things for thousands of dollars from the UK. I don't want to be sending my money out of our economy into another one, but there's nothing else here. And they've actually prevented local industry from creating a product for us because the costs of compliance exceed $250,000 per SKU. So for every product that a local business wants to bring to market, the cost of compliance is going to be $250,000. No one's going to make me a product at that price. They're just going to go for a bog standard. We're just going to see a reiteration of the same types of products. We're not going to see any patient choice. There's not going to be any access in the foreseeable future. I just spoke to a CEO from one of our local companies, and he said 5 to 10 years at this rate, we're not going to see a market for patients for another decade. That's abominable. They promised us 100 days. And we're now sitting at 3 years later with even less than we had then.
I was going to ask about the local market as well, because when you originally came on in 2018, you told us the story of Eddy in hospital, and there was a green fairy who had given you some CBD, and you talked about slipping it into his cheek and the seizures just stopped. So it seems like there was a product that did something at that stage for Eddy locally, albeit illegally sourced. Mm-hmm. Is that still the case now, and you just don't want to go down the path of having to, commit a criminal act to get it? Or is it the stuff you're getting from offshore, like exponentially better?
Yeah, so it's a bit of both. So on the one hand, I am very aware that there's an increasing caseload of green fairies being prosecuted at the moment. I don't want to contribute to that, because the majority of green fairies are actually patients themselves. They're people who have been given a cancer diagnosis, or they've got Parkinson's, or they have some other debilitating chronic pain or disability. They start making for themselves. They start making for a patient that they care for. And I don't want to curtail anybody's freedom. I don't want to put anyone behind bars because they're just trying to help us, and that weighs really heavily on my conscience. The second part is we're now at a stage where Eddy's seizure control is very dose dependent. So he really needs to have this minimum threshold of 400 mgs. And it's taken a lot of trial and error to get there, to know what that control looks like. And the issue with green fairy oil, and it's nothing to do with the providers themselves, it's actually, again, a regulatory problem, that there's no testing facilities available here in New Zealand.
Sure.
And unless I was able to know what I was giving him, I wouldn't be able to guarantee him the safety and the efficacy that a pharmaceutical grade product provides, just because I do need to know what the dose is. And if I'm just kind of randomly putting stuff in, it's just a little bit too, it's too hit and miss, and there's too much variance from batch to batch without them also having the capability to test, because they don't know. And I think until we have that transparency, it's just not what a pediatric patient needs. As an adult, it's a different thing, because you can gauge it on your own symptom relief. You have their own internal dialogue. You can go, oh, okay, I'm not hurting anymore. I can stop there.
Gotcha.
A child doesn't articulate that, so
Yeah,
you really have to by external means. And Eddy doesn't know when I give him his medicine whether it's been enough for him to go to sleep and not have a life-threatening seizure that night. So it's a different. I would love to be able to use green fairy oil, and I've been inundated with really kind offers. The issue is just that I don't know what's in it, and I really need specific cultivars. So there are really specific strains that work for Eddy. They're quite hard to grow. They're difficult to harvest CBD from. These particular strains are, they're prone to dust mite, they're prone to mold. They're just not, they're not that common. So finding fairies that have those plants to begin with would be part of the problem. And then the second part is having access to this testing, which I do think is going to start to come online soon. I am aware there is a gentleman up here in Auckland who has forked out of his own pocket some pretty comprehensive testing that will not only test for pesticides and molds and things like that, it will also give you the assay of cannabinoids present in the oil or the balm, and something like that actually opens us as a family up to local options. But what we really need is for those providers, those green fairies, to have protections in place so they don't run the risk of being prosecuted for just being generous gardeners, because let's face it, that's all they are. They're just gardeners. That's their biggest crime, is growing and cultivating a plant. We need to stop acting like these are serious, devious criminals. They're not. They're just mom and pops. They're nanas and granddads. They are just regular Joes who are put in this awful position where they can't afford medicine because it's just too expensive and too difficult to get a prescription here in New Zealand.
Yeah. You, from reading what's been going on in the media, or you've been talking to the media about this a lot, I was under the impression that sort of you were out, or that your supply had dried up, but you just said then you got 10 days left. Is that because you're eking it out, and is the reason that Eddy's suffering at the moment with more seizures is because he's not getting enough per day to kind of stave them off? And if that's the case, what happens at the end of those 10 days if you completely run dry?
So we had run out. So the whole time that Eddy ran out, we were just ordering more product all the time in the hopes that some of it would get through. And one of his products, the water-soluble one, has got through. That's the one that we have left.
Okay.
Yeah. That is the reason why he's having breakthrough seizures, is because we are eking it out. Because in the first instance, the time between us ordering and us receiving it was nearly 2 months in total. And since Eddy's epilepsy diagnosis, he's never gone that long without medicine. Mm-hmm. He's never suffered so many seizures in his life. And at that point, we were just completely dry on his birthday, on his 7th birthday. We had nothing. What we have now is we're kind of back in that early situation of a diminishing dose, where every day we have kind of less and less, and we're going to see more and more breakthrough seizures until we get those stronger oils through. Yeah.
So I guess what I'm wondering now, there's twofold, but the first fold is I don't want to minimize it by, it seems like all you need to do is order some more, but that kind of is the vibe. It's like, it seems like there were some hiccups at the border and stuff, and they're not unsolvable hiccups. It's not like, all of a sudden because of COVID everything got held up and that was the reason, there was nothing to do about it, but there was some clerical errors, if you like, on the way through. So what's going on now? Like, have you got a supply back again? And if you haven't, why not?
So just order more is what we have been doing. The issue here gets back to the problem of affordability. We are already this month $5,000 in the hole.
Wow.
Of them that's been destroyed that we don't have. And we don't have infinite resources. We just, the budget that we set aside for Eddy's medicine is tight. And then when you've kind of paid out 3 months worth and you still don't have any medicine, and I'm unable to work because I'm staying at home looking after Eddy, we're just on one income again, it gets tighter and tighter and tighter. The noose around our neck makes it almost impossible to move. And so we're always ordering more, but at the other end, the logistical hurdles are also stretching it out further and further and further. I have to stay home and be on my phone and sending emails and making calls saying, I've seen it come into the country. Where is it now? How can we get it moved from there to med clearance? How can we get it from there back to customs clearance? How can we get it out from delivery? And they're like, when I asked for it on Eddy's birthday, I'm like, now that it's gone through clearance, how soon can we get it back to us? Can he have it for his birthday? Can I give him his birthday wish? Can he not have any seizures tomorrow? And they're like, the earliest you're going to get it, feasibly is a week. We've also seen it last longer than a month. It is not the question of not ordering more. We're always ordering more. It is this insane bureaucracy that doesn't differentiate between the importance of this life-saving medicine. It just gets lumped in with like all the other luxury goods that come in through the border.
Yeah.
And it's almost insurmountable, the amount we have to pay to get access to it. So now we have 36 bottles of compliant medicine sitting in the UK ready for us to send over. And we're just kind of dotting our I's and crossing our T's because we want to buy it all and bring it all over and just have it sitting here in a dispensary at a cannabis clinic here. But there's also like this very real fear that we're going to put all that money out. And what if something happens?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
We've also, with our new prescribing doctor, he's also pointed out that they've been making mathematical errors. And on the last batch that was seized, I asked them to not destroy it and to send it back to the manufacturer because there are other patients that can benefit from it. And they said, we'll look into it. But I know from their lack of response that it's already been destroyed. Because by the time I get the letter, what is the date today?
The 4th of June.
Yeah, the 4th. So when a letter is sent on the 27th, and I receive it more than a week later and I make my request, it's too late. It's already been destroyed. So even if there is a clerical error and they've counted the CBD or the CBN wrong, it's already too late.
Yeah.
They've destroyed it. And then what? Because we've just bought all of the medicine that the manufacturer has in stock and we don't have recourse.
So then the next question is, obviously, what I'm surmising what you're saying for clarity for me as well as for other people, is there's been some clerical errors in a bureaucracy which is ludicrous, like we said before, getting a speeding ticket for doing 53. But also it's the financial outlay that you're facing that if it was with someone like Pharmac, you wouldn't have. So the next logical question, and I guess this is why you've been in the news media and I've seen you on your Instagram responding to Jacinda Ardern, talking on breakfast and that sort of thing, is what do you say to the politicians? What do you say if the Minister of Health was sitting right here about what should be happening with the CBD and the CBM, I guess, and the product that your son needs and many others obviously would benefit from as well?
It's not good enough to tell us that we need to wait until October, because that timeline has been pushed out from March this year and it was pushed out from October the year before. We were made a promise, a very clear promise when he came into government, that within 100 days we'd have this medicinal cannabis scheme online. And in fact, it's been operational for over a year, and yet we only have 2 CBD products approved in the whole country. That is not patient choice. It's completely and woefully insufficient. They need to be fast tracking all of the license applications from the local producers. The cost of compliance needs to come right down. Like, we need to be knocking off zeros right off the bottom of that. $250,000 is just insane. It's insane for them, and it's insane for us, because you're passing that cost on to the patients. You are punishing us for being sick. And without a public funding model that you haven't found a substitute for, you are literally saying to us that access and affordability is not part of your government's priority. And that completely flies in the face of what the medicinal cannabis scheme was set up to achieve. I've had a look at some redacted OIAs, and the Minister of Health then put that at the forefront. His main concern was the affordability and the access, and this has not been adequately addressed by this government. And either it's laziness or it's willful, and both are grossly negligent.
You're making a lot of noise, and a lot of people obviously supporting you publicly, and also I'm assuming behind the scenes, that support you're getting. This sounds like it's the kind of thing that could involve, an event outside Parliament at some stage. When is this? I mean, not to sound like a protest leader, but when is this going to the streets? When is this going to be a rally outside Parliament? When is your one voice going to become the hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people who are behind you in their support, but maybe behind a keyboard as opposed to being in front of a politician?
It's a really good question. I've had lots of people ask me, when are we going to march? I'm quite reluctant to ask people to march for one reason only. The majority of my supporters are very sick. They're very sick. They have some really debilitating disabilities. Their carers are living beyond their means. They're exhausted. They're strung out. I hate to put a further burden upon them, because I know that just living day to day is hard enough. It is a struggle. And for those that are scraping by just to be able to afford their hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars medicinal cannabis is difficult enough. And I'm loath to ask them to do more. That's why I like the online support, because it doesn't ask too much of them. It doesn't add more things into their day that impacts their freedom to live or quality of life. That's the only reason I haven't taken that step, because I just feel like there are so many burdens put upon them already.
So let me just give you a thought, Katy, with the greatest of love and respect. That's not your decision to make. Now, that might sound a bit harsh, that you're an advocate and a mum and someone with a loving heart, but if people who are already suffering want to get out in the streets and march because ultimately it'll help their cause, I actually think that that's something that you should also allow them to do. Imagine if this advanced the cause of what all of you wanted tenfold. Then yes, you're putting a burden on them for that one day, but imagine if that released a burden for 5 years. And when I say that's not your call to make, I'm not trying to sound like a dick, but I'm like, if these people want to be in a space where they go above and beyond to support people like you and help themselves, you should let them do it. You should let them step out, if they want to do it, and to be a part of something bigger, if that's what you chose to do.
That's interesting food for thought.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, you imagine if it, like I say, if a day's, 2 days, a weekend's inconvenience or hard work got them the product they needed 5 years sooner, it would be worth it, no matter how much they're suffering right now. I like to treat, and this is going to sound a bit patronizing, but I like to treat people sort of as adults. It's like you're an adult, you can make a decision. You can make a decision based on what's best for you right in this moment today. I don't need to make a decision for that person, even if I think that maybe it's not best for them. Ultimately, they should still have the respect, perhaps it is, to make the decision for themselves. Just a thought, nothing more.
It's a valid point. It's a really valid point.
Do you think that this is my last question, because I'm really sorry, I do have an appointment at 11 o'clock I have to get to, and I'm sure we will pick up this conversation again within the next couple of months. The cannabis referendum that didn't get passed at the last election, still can't think of a single reason it didn't get through. Literally challenging people to give me one reason why it wouldn't pass. Everything pointed towards it being a 100% positive for it passing. Literally, figuratively, everything. Do you think that the people putting that referendum forward missed a trick where they went straight for sort of legalization? If they had have gone to the medicinal cannabis, like what happened in California, more of a easy access to medicinal cannabis stores on the street, you have yourself a card to go and get it, that would have been the step towards then legalizing it fully, like following the path of what happened in California. Any thoughts around the referendum in general, but also the unfortunate, ridiculous failure of it?
Look, I don't actually see the referendum as a failure. I think that the small margin of error shows that the vast proportion of New Zealanders actually support a health-based approach, not a prohibitionist approach. I think that what those voters weren't ready for was recreational. And unfortunately, the no vote was incredibly well funded. I still can't believe that was legal. I really struggle with the offshore funding that was poured into that campaign. It really baffles me that that's allowed to happen in this country. So we had external interests literally pouring money into that campaign. The Yes campaign was very disparate. It was disconnected, didn't have the money. And also I felt like there was no cohesive, unified message. There was no attempt to actually educate the public on the harms of prohibition instead of the harms of the drug. And I think that was sorely lacking from the rhetoric. I also think the government has a huge part to account for, because on the website where you could go to find out more information, they said specifically this is not a vote about medicinal cannabis. And what that did was it really silenced our voice and our place in that conversation, because it was about us, because we didn't have access to medicinal products. So that was our only opportunity to get products online in an economical and efficient manner that wasn't met under the law that was apparently passed for us, but hasn't actually done anything to serve our needs. So there was kind of all of these competing interests. I don't think it was a failure, to be honest. I think that it was really badly handled, on both sides. And I think that right now where that needle needs to move to is cross-party support for decriminalisation. If we're not ready for legalisation, that's simply because there hasn't been sufficient education. I think that the public didn't understand what they were voting on. There's still too much prohibitionism floating around. And that I think that maybe not in the next term or the term after, but in 2 successive governments, we're going to have a huge number of eligible voters who are motivated, who are educated, who will be able to shift it back towards health-informed policy, or at least that's my hope.
Yeah. Time to wrap up. Is there anything you would like to leave us with, specifically about what you're going through right now with Eddy, or anything in general about the advocacy you're doing for the in the world of medicinal cannabis?
I think that if I could leave people with one thing, I think most people believe that medicinal cannabis has been solved in our country because we have a medicinal cannabis law, you need to know it's not working for us, that less than 1% of the population has access to medicine. It's probably less than that. That's just the only data that we have surfaced. And where you can and when you can, please advocate for us, to prescribers, to your friends and family. Please share our videos, share our stories. And when I launch my next parliamentary petition in the next week or so, if you could take 2 minutes of your time to sign it, it would mean the world to me and my boy.
So if people want to get more involved with that, wellfitmum.com is a place to go to see the current petition, I guess, you're putting before the female leaders and Minister of Health. And also, if people want to follow you easily with your videos and content, I am Katy, Katy Thomas is your Instagram. Probably the best place to find you. Would that be fair?
Yep, that's definitely the best place to find.
Oh, have we got a woken up, babe? Perfect timing, Katy.
Hi, buddy.
Is he going to make an appearance at the end of the video?
Yeah, we'll just quickly jump him in.
Oh, there we go. Hey, Eddy. Perfect way to wrap up the conversation, Katy. It's been quite direct as to thematic conversation. We often are a bit more kind of spreading through the conversation, but as I said, let's get back together within a couple of months and we'll do it all again. We'll find out where you're up to and we'll talk more about things like internet dating, which we did last time.
Thanks a lot, Pat.
All right, Katy, all the best.